Today I'm gonna talk about Allemansrätten, the Swedish right to public access in nature, and see just how far I can take it. Allemansrätten is a Swedish word that means the right to public access, and it's pretty awesome. What it essentially means is that everyone has the right to move freely in Swedish nature. You can hike in every forest, you can swim in every lake, and you can put up a tent everywhere. Well, almost. This is where things get a little bit tricky. The right to public access is heavily dependent on a collective responsibility. You personally have a responsibility to determine if what you're doing is appropriate or not. For example, are you disturbing animals in a season when they're having their young? That's not okay. Or were you planning on pitching a tent in the middle of a sunflower field? That's not allowed. And most importantly, are you leaving any trash behind? That's absolutely not okay. Allemansrätten isn't a carte blanche to do whatever you want in Swedish nature. It's a right that comes with responsibilities. I feel like a school teacher when I'm preaching about all of this, but it really is a useful thing to know when visiting Sweden. The right to public access is a special thing in the Nordics. It exists in Sweden, Norway, Finland, Iceland, and actually Scotland as well. Strangely enough, it doesn't exist in Denmark, but those Danes are a bit weird. There's also a limited right to public access in some countries. You can roam freely in Estonia, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, but you can't put up any tents. The word Allemansrätten was first used in 1940, but the concept has been present for hundreds of years in the Nordics. In the beginning of the 1900s, it was noted that people are accustomed to being able to pick berries and roam freely in nature. But what exactly are you allowed to do? Let's dive into what rights the right to public access actually gives you. First of all, you're allowed to walk, ride a bike, or ride a horse everywhere in Swedish nature. I don't know if you can ride other animals, but I'd guess that if you have a water buffalo or a camel, you're allowed to ride them as well. And I do mean just about everywhere. You won't see any "trespassers will be shot" signs in Sweden. Mostly because we don't have any guns, but still. As long as you don't disturb anyone or anything, then it's allowed to walk on private property in Sweden. This includes all the forests, all the mountains, all the national parks and places in the city as well. You're also allowed to do rock climbing and pick mushrooms and berries. Oh, and you can ski as well, of course. You're basically allowed to transport yourself all over nature, as well as pick naturally occurring plants and fruits. And you can also pitch a tent just about everywhere. You don't need to find a camping site if you want to put up a tent in Sweden. In fact, when I was a poor kid hitchhiking around in Sweden, camping site owners often gave me the tip that it cost money to camp on their site because they provide an additional service. But if I took my tent just 50 meters out into the woods, it would be completely free. But there are some limitations when it comes to putting up a tent and to Allemansrätten in general. This is the part that you really need to pay attention to. The fun part was all your rights, but now come all the limitations. If you're gonna pitch a tent, you're not allowed to do that close to where anyone lives. How close is close? Well, that depends. You're responsible for ensuring that you don't disturb anyone. If your tent is out of sight and you'll be quiet, then you might get away with being relatively close. But if you're gonna sing campfire songs around a bonfire, then you'd better be way off into the woods. And speaking of bonfire, you're allowed to make a fire. Sometimes. During summers, there's often an open burning prohibition because of the risk of forest fires. If you are allowed to make a campfire, you still can't do it on grassy places or directly on rock because it can crack. Only you can prevent forest fires. Literally. It's your personal responsibility to ensure that the fire doesn't spread. Allemansrätten also has limitations when it comes to blocking people's access. You can't block roads, for example. You're allowed to go kayaking and swim in lakes and even use private jetties, but only if the owner isn't using it. You're allowed to pick mushrooms and berries, but you're not allowed to hunt or fish. You need explicit permission and licenses to do any stuff like that, unless it's explicitly permitted, like here in Stockholm. It's actually permitted to fish right here. Some areas are protected, and you will see signs about what you're not allowed to do there. You can't camp in national parks, for example. And you can't pitch a tent in a public park either, otherwise people might have gotten ideas about living in central Stockholm in the middle of a park. But that wouldn't have worked either way, because the right to public access only gives you the right to stay a couple of days in a tent at each place. In general, consider if you're gonna disturb anyone or cause any harm to nature. In that case, it's not allowed. And most importantly, do not leave any trash ever. Try to leave the place in a better shape than when you arrived. That's the proper way to enjoy Allemansrätten. In the beginning of the video, I said that I was gonna see just how far I can take Allemansrätten. Well, it's time for something stupid. Next week I'm going on a road trip to Norway, and I have a new tent and a sleeping bag that I wanna try out before that. The problem is that I live in central Stockholm, and I don't wanna travel too far just to try the tent. So I decided to find a place I can pitch my tent in central Stockholm. And no, it's not right here. First of all, I can't camp in a park because that's not allowed, and I can't camp near where anyone lives. That makes it a bit more difficult because there are houses everywhere. But I think that there's one place nearby where I am allowed to pitch my tent. Let's take a little walk. I bet you've seen some of these urban camping people on YouTube who pitch tents in weird places and camouflage them. I'm not really aiming for that. I think that what I'm doing is perfectly legal. There are certain parts of the city that's full of nature, but they aren't designated as parks. I tried searching online when it comes to restrictions in Allemansrätten for those kind of areas, but I couldn't find any. So unless I'm missing some fundamental law, I think that I'm allowed to put up my tent here in Kristineberg, close to where I live. It's still a stupid idea, of course. I'm constantly gonna be disturbed by the subway or by boats going by. And I'm probably gonna be woken up by a random jogger who shouts at me, wondering what I'm doing here. I might also be mugged in the middle of the night. That's something that I didn't really consider. And there's also the risk that I'm missing something and that I am breaking the law. But as far as I know, this little part of central Stockholm is not restricted in any way, and the right to public access applies, as it does all over Sweden. I'm not exactly an outdoorsy person, as you can tell. It's vaguely tent-shaped. I think it'll have to do. I still have a couple of these pins left, but never mind. It's just one night. I seem to remember that tents were bigger when I was a kid. Or maybe I've gotten bigger myself. I'm not sure. But it's still nice to enjoy nature, even if it's in the middle of the city. It's about time for me to cook dinner, and I've got something else that's pretty useful to know. This summer has been pretty dry, so there is an open burning prohibition, but I am allowed to cook food on a portable stove anyway. So what is my dinner going to be? What type of culinary masterpiece am I going to cook up? The ambrosia of the gods, of course, instant ramen. And to make this meal a little bit more Swedish, I'm also gonna fry some meatballs along with that. Don't knock it until you try it. It's actually a really good combination. Now I'm just gonna relax and enjoy the view, and you should like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day. But don't go yet. Also, check out this video up here in the corner for more interesting facts about Sweden.